Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I know people usually don't talk about subjects like this, but I'm going to talk about it because I know some people who had experienced situations such as these. So there is also not only domestic violence in heterosexual relationships, there's domestic violence in the LGBTQ community as well. And so a lot of times it is taboo just even mentioning anything having to do with LGBTQ people or community, that is, per se, because of the fights and the battles and the wars in terms of equality and accepting people for who they are and who they choose to be in relationships with. So this is sort of a blog, and I picked it up because I thought this was something that would be useful. So it says, because a majority of domestic violence awareness movement has focused on heterosexual, which is male and female, relationships, members of the LGBTQ community have been largely left out of that movement. However, recent research shows that LGBTQ members fall victim to domestic violence as well at equal or even higher rates compared to heterosexual counterparts. So this is a couple, supposedly, and quick statistics. So about domestic violence in that community of the LGBTQ. So 43.8% of lesbian women, 61.1% of bisexual women have experienced rape, physical violence, and stalking by an intimate partner at some point in their lifetime, as opposed to 35% of heterosexual women. So 30, not 36, but 26, number two, 26% of gay men and 37.3% of bisexual men have experienced rape, physical violence, and stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime, or in comparison to 29% of the heterosexual men. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute, a small minute. I believe the reason being is, look at the situation. There's so much discrimination towards people that are in the gay community. And so whomever you're in a relationship with, like I said, with as in um, heterosexual relationships, if you feel trapped in that relationship, they might be using money, the cars in their name, the houses in their name, the apartments in their name. It can also be the same way in a relationship that is gay, or in a relationship that's lesbian, or relationships where you're with a partner, an intimate partner, and they use something to hold over your head like a dark cloud. Like, if you leave me, I own the car. If you leave me, where are you going to go? And think about it. In relationships, some of these relationships, I'm not saying all, for a scenario, let's say the person left their family because the family didn't accept them for who they were and who they have a relationship with. And so the only people they've connected with is that intimate partner. And if that intimate partner used that to an advantage to pretty much isolate them, they've already felt isolated because their family doesn't accept them for who they are, whether they're lesbian, trans, gay, whatever you want to entitle it or not entitle it. If they have ostracized a family member and caused that family member to just say, screw it, I'll just live with my partner, and then that partner becomes abusive, and that's the only place that you have to stay, that might be a form of emotional abuse where you're tied to that intimate partner. Your name's not on everything. Um, they own everything, and basically you moved in on them. And so they can kick you out, or they can hold that against you to say there's no other place you can go, you know. unless you have a supportive friends or network or some other place. And a lot of times people will end up in shelters. And shelters, I mind you, that are accepting of who they are, because you can even face that within homelessness. And I've seen that where you can be homeless and gay, and then people will treat you a particular way that is hurtful. So this does happen. So in a study of male same-sex relationships, only 26% of men call the police, and with that is the masculinity thing. Does the police take you serious if you say that you had a relationship, a gay relationship, and you were abused? Do they take that serious? And so that's a whole nother ball game. For assistance, they only have 26% of the men that will call for assistance experiencing near lethal violence. So in 2012, fewer than 5% of LGBTQ survivors of intimate partner violence sought orders of protection, because how do you go to court, and who do you talk to? So you already feel like the world has views, discriminatory views towards you. So how do you feel safe in this instance? So transgender has been a big deal lately. In terms of the violence, there have been transgender people who have been discriminated, or they've been attacked, or even murdered. There's been a lot of murders. Their victims are far more likely to experience intimate partner violence in public as well, compared to those who do not identify as transgender. So bisexual victims are more likely to experience sexual violence compared to people who do not identify as bisexuals, because people tend to use your sexuality to an advantage. They hold that against you, or they hold it over you. And so they may even commit acts of violence. There's situations, I believe you me, that people, they won't say that they're gay, they don't consider themselves gay, but they will have sex with a person who maybe they have said or admit their sexuality, and they're more open about themselves. And you'll have this other person who they're either in the closet, or either they don't consider themselves part of this community, although they fantasize being with someone in this community. And then they'll do something, commit, maybe lie, and try to see how this thing is, and they might even commit an act of violence towards people in this protected class. So LGBTQ, Black, African American are victims are more likely to experience physical intimate partner violence compared to those who do not identify as Black and African American. So that's a whole nother thing right there, because it's taboo in the Black community. And then a lot of times, who do you go to talk to about a situation? Who can you trust when you have people that ostracize you for your who you choose to be in a relationship with? And so, who do you confide with? So LGBTQ white victims are more likely to experience sexual violence compared to those who do not identify as white. And so you might be a white person that's in this community, and someone will meet you online and they don't disclose what they're about to do to you, take you somewhere, and then violently attack you. And so that person is nowhere to be found, and you're looking for them. And they use these online sites. A lot of times there are predators on there. They're looking for people in these communities, be it lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, whatever you want to coin yourself as. Or if you don't, if you just, maybe your mannerisms speak louder than maybe your words or whatever. Some people are more flamboyant, some people are more reserved and conservative. They don't air their personal business to the world. As you see, some people are okay with disclosing who they get in relationships with. Others are more private. And so privacy sometimes can still reveal who you are when you get into these relationships with people who are predatory. And so they may prey on that situation, take advantage of you, meet you somewhere, and then you're a victim of sexual violence. So types of domestic violence affecting this community: 20% of the victims have experienced some of the physical violence, 16% have experienced threats of intimidation, 15% verbally harassed, 4% survivors experience sexual violence, 11% intimate violence. Cases reported to NCADVP's 2015 report involved a weapon. And so you'll have people in this community who stay really silent about these types of acts because they're so busy trying to be able to be accepted in terms of have equality, exception of equality, and be able to marry people who they love rather than get into the technicalities of being in these relationships. You forget at the end of the day, these are human beings, these are people, they have lives, feelings, and they're not perfect either. And so, as opposed to what you'll see on YouTube and some of the other sites where people make it seem like the LGBTQ is perfect and happy, and there's no violence, and there's nobody hates each other. There's no everything is this is an umbrella term, like everybody's synonymous. So L is for lesbian, G is for gay, B is for bisexual, T is for transgender, Q is for queer. They're not all the same. They're not one and the same. It says a family, but it's not one big happy family. So things can happen. Um, there could be differences of the views, difference of political views and opinions as well within this community is so. Also, racism is prevalent as well. The same thing. So I'm not going to read all of it. You can read it at your own leisure. But what I do know is that the barriers to seeking services, usually a societal belief that domestic violence does not occur in LGBTQ communities, potential homophobia of staff and service providers from non-LGBT people, violence victims may come into contact with, so they face discrimination or they're afraid of having to deal with that. Lack of appropriate training regarding this community, so people are not trained to counsel LGBTQ people in domestic violence situations properly. A fear that airing your problems among this group and the population will take away from the progress towards equality and fuel anti-LGBTQ bias, which already has happened even without this. But domestic violence shelters are typically female only, and transgender individuals may not be allowed in entrance due to their gender and genitalia legal status. And so dangers associated with outing oneself also. So if you have not disclosed your sexuality, you're more private about who you are, you're risking possible rejection from your family, your friends, society. It changes your life. The lack of survivors being unaware of LGBT friendly, TQ friendly assistance resources, and low levels of confidence in the effectiveness of the legal system, which that happens on straight across the board in most groups, even outside of the gay community, LGBTQ people. So helpful resources are down at the bottom. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it has a wealth of information. I'm sure other people could look it up, but most people don't think, from what you hear in all of these little videos, that this is one big happy family. There can be problems in any relationship. It doesn't matter what type of relationship. So a lot of people are not aware that at the end of the day, you're still human people. You're human beings. You're going to have issues straight across the board. It doesn't matter. Just because you're gay doesn't make things, any different. The way I see, that's in my eyes. You can still have difficulties, and you still have preferences, even in this group. And despite what people say, the stereotypes, you don't just pick whoever you see. You're not attracted to whomever you see. And so that's the thing that burns me up about women. They think if you're in this community, that right away any woman you see is the woman you want to lay with. That's not the way it works. It doesn't work like that. Even in this community, there are women that have preferences of who they want to get involved with. They don't just see every woman and be like, oh, I'm picking her, and it doesn't work like that. There has to be some kind of attraction from both ends. So the other, and then two, who would want to do that? It's bad enough that you're trying to live discreet. If you're trying to live, in, you're more private about yourself. But when you, if you see someone, you don't want someone who is not identifying with this community. Why would you put yourself through that havoc only to be outed or to have to maybe be abused by this person? Maybe the person, they will try to do something with you intimately, but they don't come out and disclose that to around their peers, and then they somehow make it look like you're the one that has pursued them when it's the other way around. So there's a lot of things, dynamics with this. So I thought this was something that was useful because of domestic violence. It is a big deal. I will say a story about a young woman who, she was in a relationship. I've heard several stories, but I've heard stories where people get online and then they meet people who are, they're specifically pursuing people for sexual favors, and then they end up killing them, or they're a stalker. That's what it mentioned in here. They get involved with the person, they have a discreet relationship, and they don't disclose and out themselves to their family and their friends. The relationship progresses, and then feelings start coming into play. And then when that person wants to be serious, this other person never really wanted to be who they really are, and they end up turning on you or they become violent. Um, then you can have the other way around where maybe the person's okay with being in this community, but they're obsessed with you and they continuously call you and they continuously follow you and they start to stalk you. You're not interested in them, but they have an interest, in genuine interest in you. But they're going around saying they're all these things and they're not gay, but somehow they're attracted to you and they keep following you and they keep calling you and they won't stop bugging you, and you have to block your calls. So stuff like that happens. Believe me, it happens. And so these things right here are just as aggressive as the hetero relationships. The other thing that I wanted to add, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I do not understand why you have some women who, there's different women, some women who are more feminine, some who are, you know, sort of tomboyish, and there's some that are like really hardcore. They look really they have a lot of masculine mannerisms. There are some relationships where some people can be extremely abusive to their lesbian partner. And I don't understand for the life of me. I did know a story where this woman, she had a woman like that. And I noticed that a lot of times some women, for that reason, within this community, they will say, I don't want a butch woman, because they assume, they equate that with somebody who's too aggressive, who tries to play that role to where it is so aggressive to where it becomes abusive. And so I knew somebody who actually had a friend, a relationship with someone like that, and all they did was beat up on her. And this girl, she was, kind of on the rough side. So she never was the rational type. When it came to arguments, there was always arguments. There was no rationalization, no sitting down, let's talk. It was just, she was just beating, it, abusing this girl. And so it can happen in these relationships as well. So that's why I was saying, somebody was on here making it seem, and there's been some other videos where they make it seem like this is one big happy family, but they do a disservice when they don't mention that you can be from any group, and there's people that will be obsessed with you, that will stalk you. They will do different things to you to hurt you, and then maybe they're not calling themselves a part of this community. They could be people who claim to be heterosexual and still pursue people like this. They won't tell you. They won't tell you they've had an experience. They won't tell you they have a fantasy or a fetish. It isn't just a fantasy and fetish, but maybe they've had several relationships with individuals, but they, as soon as the relationship becomes more serious or progresses, they know that I'm going to have to tell my family, I'm going to have to tell my friends, what are they going to think about me? And they can't live with that, and they become abusive. And so I just wanted to let this kind of go at this point, because I don't know how long this video is going to be. I don't even know how this is going to be received, but there is abuse in lesbian relationships and gay relationships, and any of the other relationships, and hetero relationships as well, uh, man and woman. And so sometimes it can be the other way around in relationships where it's a male and the female may be the abuser. So a lot of times, just like it said down in here with gay men, how do you call the police and explain to them that you've been abused by a gay lover? What do you do? And so these are touchy situations, and that's probably why these relationships, when they do become like that, if they're ever like that, you don't hear as much about it, or it's not aired, or it's not taken serious, or it's not a priority as well. It's not looked at as an issue, and they may have people who already have formed discrimination or bias to this group of people, and feel like well, you shouldn't be gay, or you shouldn't be with her anyway, or you shouldn't be with him, that's the reason why it happened, but that's not true, because even with males and females, they get in fights, they get in arguments, there's abusive relationships. So what do? Do you say the same thing? Well, you shouldn't be with him, you shouldn't be with him, and then what's the story? It's different than, oh, so it's the same thing. It's like relationships are not easy. Doesn't matter what types of relationships they are, but I just thought I would leave you with that. But I noticed they don't really talk a lot about this, and so I felt the need to mention it, because I know some people who have experienced the stalking, the pursuits, the phone calling, the random phone calling, and the obsession. And you don't even have to do anything. It's not like, a lot of people will ask you, well, what did you do to her? you know, thinking to myself, I'm like, man, why would they ask the question like that? But the thing is that it's not necessarily what a person does to a person. You may not even do anything. You may not have any relationship with anybody. They just see something about you. They're attracted, and they can't stop calling you, or they can't stop bothering you. And I've experienced that with men, where they keep calling and calling, and you have to block your phone. So anyway, I'm going to let this video go. So like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for listening. I don't know how people are going to receive this, but abuse can happen in any relationship. It's not just the hetero relationships, but these relationships, I think it would be higher, because of the fact that, because look what it is, it's like, how do you call for help, because now you have to disclose who you're with and what this whole thing is about. But these things, I believe, go underreported a lot, and so this would fall in line with domestic violence. And so if domestic violence is up during the pandemic, as well as hetero domestic violence is up, and these relationships violence, if there's any in that relationship, those instances are probably just as high, if not maybe even higher, if you're having to stay confined with a person who has issues. So having said that, like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for listening.